Good morning, or good afternoon, or good evening, wherever it is in the world you are joining us for this program. Thank you so much for joining StriveScan's virtual college exploration program. This program is in partnership with the Colleges That Change Lives, and I have a few housekeeping items before we begin with this session called Reaching Out, Engaging and Communicating with the College Admission Office. First and foremost, you are encouraged to ask questions throughout the entire session, and the questions will be submitted via the Q&A button that you see on your screen. When you send a question, it is sent to all of our panelists, and they will work to answer the question during the session and at the conclusion of the session. They may not get to every question, but they will also receive a transcript of all of the questions submitted today, so they'll be able to follow up with you individually as well. If you have a general question about the presentation, feel free to submit it as is. If you have a question about a specific institution, about Hendrix or Agnes Scott, make sure to indicate that in your question as well. So instead of saying, how's your pre-med program? Hey, Agnes Scott, I'm very interested in your pre-med program specifically. That way, those admission offices will be able to follow up with you afterward if they don't get to it during this session. As a reminder, your camera and your microphone are turned off. The panelists cannot see or hear you. So if you have any questions, make sure to type them in through that Q&A. This is one of 50 panel presentations and individual information sessions that are being hosted through Tuesday evening. And we encourage you to check out the programming as well as the recordings of past programming at strivescan.com/virtual/CTCL. You can see the Agnes Scott information session recording is already listed there if you're very interested in Agnes Scott. Finally, when you sign up for today's session, you received a barcode. You do not need that barcode for this virtual event. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to my panelists.
Thank you so much, Zach. We appreciate that introduction and that instruction. My name is Ryan Cassell, and I am from Hendrix College, and we are pleased that you signed up for this session today. The session for reaching out, engaging, and communicating with a college admissions office. What you can expect out of today is the outline of our talk today. You're going to hear about a timeline of engagement with admission representatives. Jade, who you'll hear from in just a moment, will offer general tips about communicating with admission representatives, including email, phone, social media. We're going to have a little fun as I share some communication disasters, as I like to call them. And I need to tell you, some of the language is PG-13, so I hope you're up for some of that today. We won't get too bad, though. But these are all examples of real scenarios where we've had different emails and different communication type disasters. And then we'll do our best to open it up to any questions and answers throughout the session. And with that, I will turn it over to Jade and then Ash, our moderator, Q&A moderator today, who will introduce themselves.
Hi everyone, my name is Jade Domingue. I work for Agnes Scott College, which is located in downtown Decatur, which is just about 10 minutes away from downtown Atlanta. Agnes Scott, just to kind of give you a little bit of an overview, we are a small liberal arts college for women. If you are looking at a lot of CTCL schools, and I hope that you are, you're probably looking at a lot of small liberal arts colleges. What I think makes Agnes Scott different is we are the only women's college in the kind of CTCL world. We are also known for our signature summit curriculum, which really kind of emphasizes global learning and leadership development for all of our students. So we are kind of rethinking of the way that you traditionally think about the liberal arts and sciences through a 21st century lens. So just like all of our students take those English classes, those foreign language classes, those STEM classes that are integral to kind of that liberal arts experience, we also promise all of our students coursework and experiential learning in global learning and in leadership development. So that's a little bit about Agnes Scott. My colleague Ash is going to be a little bit more behind the scenes to answer questions. So I really want to emphasize that you can put questions in the Q&A box as you have them. And Ash will answer some of those real time, but other questions we might save for the end for Q&A. Ash, do you have anything that you want to add?
No, other than I'm excited for this presentation and to hear from all of you students who have questions and curiosities.
Thank you, Ash. And then Brian, if you want to introduce yourself again.
Certainly. Thank you, Jade and Ash. And as I mentioned before, my name is Ryan Cassell, and I'm a new Dean of Admission at Hendricks College in Conway, Arkansas. Before this experience, I did work at another liberal arts college. And before that, I served as a college counselor. So working with high school students through the college search and selection process. So I approached this from a few different lenses and perspectives. A little bit about Hendricks. We are in Conway, Arkansas. We're a school of around 1,100 students, so small residential environment, a place you'll be well known and well cared for, very intimate environment. We have 48 states represented and 19 countries. Much like Jade mentioned with Agnes Scott about the curriculum, and this is something you can expect from many liberal arts colleges, is we want you to leave this place very well versed. Our co-curricular expectation is that you will go on what we call the Odyssey program. Think of it as a journey where you'll have at least 3 hands-on immersion experiences covering artistic creativity, global awareness, professional and leadership development, service to the world, undergraduate research. You'll certainly leave this place developing an expertise in your chosen major or majors, but we also want you to leave this place being very well versed in many subject areas, both in and out of the classroom. So one more piece, we have Division III athletics. Of just over a third of our students are varsity athletes. And so this is a place you're able to find great balance between the sport you love and the academic experience for which you are here. So I'll turn it back to you, Jade, talking about the timeline of engagement and different recommendations you have.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry, I'm waiting for the screen to prompt me a little. So I wanted to we wanted to start this by talking about an overall timeline of how you can be engaged with the colleges that you're kind of searching for and interested in throughout the entire process. So starting right at the beginning, before you've applied, when you're still doing your search, we have some suggestions for what you can be doing in terms of communicating with those colleges. So one of those suggestions that we have is to make yourself known to the Office of Admission. Lots of colleges consider something called demonstrated interest, which essentially means that they're kind of keeping track of how you are engaging with that institution. If we are kind of going through our review process and we might have like a certain amount of seats that we're able to kind of offer for admission, a lot of the time we want to offer those spots to students who are genuinely engaged and excited about our institutions. So ways that you can show interest are doing things like doing tours, whether that is in person or virtual options, making sure that you're registering and attending at those kinds of things. Signing up for something like an informational interview can also be really a helpful way for us to know that you're that you're showing demonstrated interest. Something else that's really great about these pieces, though, is that the more we get to know you, the more we can make sure that we're kind of catering our communication to you as well. So if I'm talking to a student who tells me about their passion for clarinet and their involvement in clarinet in high school, that really helps me to know, okay, this might be a student I want to send a music scholarship information to. This might be a student where I want to talk more about opportunities to perform in Atlanta. So us getting to know you a little bit better helps us to modify our communication for your purposes as well. Checking your application status online. I know at Agnes Scott, we have an online portal that you can log into, and that's a great way to see those pieces that you have a little bit less control over, like your recommendation letters, your transcript. You can see when those are coming into us, especially as you're approaching deadlines. For colleges where there might not be an online portal, you might reach out to your admission counselor a little bit, like maybe a couple weeks before a deadline, and say, hey, am I still missing anything, to make sure that everything is in. You also, I would encourage you to, and this goes for really any time in this process, but make sure that you're letting an admission rep know if your college plans have changed. We absolutely will not take it personally, but it definitely means that we would probably be, we wouldn't be sending you communication if we knew that you weren't interested. So that means less phone calls and emails bogging down your voicemail or your inbox. We mentioned virtual visits or on-campus visits, so on-campus or off-campus engagement with admission professionals. And finally, if we reach out to you, it's always great to hear a response, especially if it's important information where we're asking specific questions and that kind of a thing. If we've taken that time to reach out to you, we definitely want to hear back from you as well. Ryan, do you have anything that you want to add to about that piece?
I think I'll just add the last piece. If we reach out to you and, with in an individualized way, and we don't hear back from you, sometimes all we have to assume is you may no longer be interested. So we love that engagement, and I'll echo Jade's comment about reaching back out to us.
Awesome, thank you. So after you have your application in, you can expect that there will be a time where you're hearing back from us and you get notification. If you're admitted, we love hearing from you that you have gotten your acceptance and that there's an acknowledgement of that piece. That's always really exciting for us. I know after we usually send out our first round of decisions in December, and I'm always, checking my email and looking forward to hearing back from eager students. Now, some colleges will have a deferral option, they will defer students or have a wait list. So that's another kind of result that could happen. It's important to remember that this is not the same as being denied. And if you are still very interested in that institution, if you are deferred or waitlisted, some colleges have both, some colleges have neither. But if you get one of these options and it's a college that you're genuinely interested in, I would definitely still stay in touch with the admission representative. Let them know that you are still interested and check in to see if there's any other information that we could use in order to then make a decision. I know at Agnes Scott specifically, and again, it works different for different institutions, but if we aren't able to give a student an admission or deny a decision immediately and we decide to defer a student, usually it's that we do just genuinely want a little bit more information in order to make a decision. So it's really helpful for us when you reach out to us and you let us know that you're still interested and that you can get those documents in. Anything to add, Ryan? Okay, awesome. And then finally, May 1st is the traditional kind of national college deadline. You can check in with your colleges to see if they have a different deadline, but for the vast majority of us, it's going to be May 1st. And so we would encourage you by May 1st to make sure all of your questions are answered and you have all the information you need in order to enroll. Typically, enrolling there is an enrollment deposit, and oftentimes that's not refundable, and we do that on purpose because we want to make sure that at this point you are kind of securing your decision. You are definitely, we can definitely welcome you and have a bed for you and have you ready to kind of join us in the fall. For that reason, we would really encourage you to make sure that you're enrolling in just one college. If you need a little bit more time or something like that, some colleges might have some kind of an extension, but I would definitely encourage you to make sure you're enrolling at one institution. And another piece of this is making sure that you're letting those colleges know that when you have been admitted to another institution and you've made a different choice, I really encourage you to let the college know that. Every year, kind of two different things happen with students that I've worked very, very closely with. Sometimes I work with students and I've been working with them for multiple years, and I've gotten together a portfolio of information about a major for them, and I've connected them with students, and I stop hearing from them kind of randomly. And that's always really difficult, I think, especially because we're developing these relationships, but I don't take it personally if a student doesn't choose Agnes Scott, but I want to be able to congratulate them and get excited for them about where they're going. I'm also probably going to be consistently reaching out to a student until I hear back. So it's always easier and more respectful to just let us know if you're not interested anymore. A better way to handle that is that I have also worked with students who, again, I've worked closely with them, and they send me a really polished email that's saying like, hey, Jade, thank you so much for the work that you kind of have done for us or for me. I'm going to go to Hendrix because I love Conway and I love the Odyssey program. And so I find that it's a better fit for me. I always love hearing where a student ultimately decides to go and what kind of drove that decision. That's always a really great kind of piece of information, but even if it's just that you need to let us know that you've decided not to come to our institution, that's always helpful information. Anything you'd add about that, Ryan?
No, I'll just reiterate what you said about letting us know. We sometimes jokingly say that a student is breaking up with us. And many times, as Jade mentioned, I'll ask, where are you choosing to go? And many times they're shocked when I say, I think that's a great college. And I have friends on their admission staff. And honestly, there are some students who have I've worked with in the past and they've gone elsewhere, and they stay in touch with me, and their parents stay in touch with me. And it's just, those relationships are so special. And with you looking at CTCL schools, we think that those relationships are special to you as well. So continue to communicate with us.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that's great, great input as well. So now that we've talked about kind of what should be maybe the content of your communication throughout this timeline, I wanted to talk about just some tips for different ways that you might be communicating with us. So we're starting with email, and I do want to say we're giving you a lot of advice on things that you might want to avoid and how to kind of be professional in this process. I do want to say that I recognize that y'all are high school students and that you're still learning this piece, and hopefully this is a really exciting and an empowering time to kind of start learning this professional transition as you kind of come into adulthood. But I do, I know that it can be a little, I don't want to be too intimidating. I want this to be kind of helpful. So some things that I want to talk about, communication tips. In terms of email, having a professional email address. Ryan gave us some examples of email addresses that students have emailed with him in the past that were a little less appropriate for our purposes. So if you haven't already, maybe making an email address specifically for colleges. That could also just be helpful for like an organization piece, right? So just making sure that all of your things, everything related to colleges is in one place that's separate than how you're communicating with your friends. That might be helpful in general. I think I was surprised by this piece, but I feel like text messaging wasn't as popular when I was kind of going through this process. But I feel like a lot of the time students will send an email the same way they would a text message. Emails typically should have a little bit more structure and kind of professionalism to them than a text message would. We would expect kind of more proper grammar and punctuation. I will say, my office, we text with students. That's perfectly fine. And again, I would just expect that a text message communication looks a little different than than an email communication. And including a subject line, that just helps us to make sure that it doesn't go into our spam. So of course we love seeing subject lines. It helps us to prioritize and know what to expect opening an email, but for your sake, it also helps to just make sure that you get a response sooner. All right, so now some phone communication tips. And I do want to say, honestly, sometimes we do send these mass emails. I know that sometimes your email box gets really blown up, and I understand that that can be a little overwhelming. But I do want to say that if we're kind of taking that time to like pick up the phone and give you a phone call and leave a voicemail, it probably means that we have really important or time sensitive information or something like that. So I would make sure that you're regularly kind of checking your voicemail, that you have an appropriate voicemail. This past year, I've been working with a student who had, she was such a great student. I would call her back about maybe a financial aid question she had, or she was invited to our big scholarship weekend. So I was kind of responding to, or I was trying to remind her to sign up for that. But her voicemail was, I would say, really off-putting. She would say, I don't check my voicemail, I don't answer my phone, just send me a text. And I see how that's funny when you're with your friends or like to telemarketers, I get it. But when you're when it's coming to an admission counselor, when that's a phone number that you're sharing with an admission counselor, keep in mind that we can also, we're also hearing that voicemail. So maybe making sure that you have a voicemail set up and that it's professional. Also on that same note, deleting old messages so that your inbox doesn't fill up. I definitely have had students who have tried to reach out to me and I'm trying to get back in touch with them, but I can't like leave a voicemail, so they don't even know that I gave them a call. So making sure that you're keeping up with those old voicemails. And then when you do call us back, I really want to emphasize that you'll probably get a response sooner if we can really easily understand your name and your phone number. So I say this as someone who speaks very, very quickly. When you are leaving a voicemail, I would encourage you to really slow down and make sure that you're overemphasizing your name and your contact information at least. Ryan gave some examples of conversations that we would, or things that we probably wouldn't want to hear when you call us or when you call us back. Ryan, do you want to speak to either of those pieces?
Certainly. It's always, I always kind of chuckle and a little sad inside when, I leave a thoughtful voicemail with a student and then moments later I pick up the phone and without even an introduction, I hear, "Hey, did you just call this number?" So listen to thoughtful voicemails from us. And then, this second quote, this was an experience I had a few years ago. A student called me and said, "Coach Smith told me to call you about an interview and something else. Can you call me?" The student didn't leave his name or number or anything. Now, I just happened at the time to have the time to look in the database, and I did a reverse lookup of the phone number, but I don't always have that time, and admission reps won't either. So in this case, it worked out that I was able to get back in touch with this student. But had I been busier at the time, I might not have had the luxury of that time. And then this young man would have just been waiting for me to hear a response and would think I was being unresponsive.
Yeah, thank you for that anecdotal kind of example. So I also wanted to address social media, because truthfully, social media can be, especially right now, just such a great resource for you to learn about colleges. Ryan and I can talk about Hendrix and Agnes Scott as much as we want, but I know you really want to hear from students and you want to see what they're doing, and you want that authentic kind of experience. And a lot of that comes from places like Instagram and YouTube and Twitter, Facebook, if you're still on Facebook. Some of our departments are on Facebook too. So, I really encourage you to be taking advantage of that. But on that same note, again, when you're kind of entering this professional world in general, I encourage you to remember that colleges might be, looking at your social media, just making sure that you're being appropriate on social media in general. And then also remembering a great tip is Google Alerts. You can actually kind of put your information, you can put your name in there and your email address, and anytime your name pops up on the web, you would get an alert from Google about that. So that's a great way of knowing kind of what would happen if an admission office might put your name into Google or something like that. So that's just another thing to keep in mind in terms of how you're presenting yourself to colleges. And just some general advice, we really would love for this to be student initiated. Now, I know that parents have questions and guidance counselors have questions and guardians, and we're happy to work with them, especially alongside a student. But again, this can be a really empowering experience for you as you're kind of entering this new world. So we would really we appreciate when the communication is student initiated, when the student is the one taking ownership of this process. Face-to-face interaction is valued, and these last two bullets I would say kind of go together. We would love to talk to you. We'd love to set up things like interviews over, a lot of us aren't having in-person meetings right now, but over Zoom, over phone, just making sure that we're able to get to know you a little bit better. Something I really want to emphasize is that many admission officers are in what we do because we love working with students. We love getting to know our students a little bit better. So please do not be intimidated to reach out to us and to use us as a resource through this process. I'll turn things over to Ryan now to give some examples of some not so great communication that he's seen.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Jade. So as I mentioned earlier, these are some real scenarios. We have changed names of individuals and colleges, of course, but these are real scenarios that have happened. Now, I have to tell you, normally when I'm sharing this information, it's in a crowd of people and there's laughter. So I'm just going to trust that you're laughing out there when you're supposed to at appropriate times. All right, so this is an email from a student asking about a scholarship. So, hi, I'm Michael. I hope you're doing well. Let me see here. So the subject line was, has the, let's say, Franklin Scholarship been awarded yet? That's all it was, all right? No body of message, it was just the subject line. So at least there was a subject line. So I respond back to the student, hi, Michael, I hope you are doing well. The Franklin Scholarship has been awarded and accepted. And this is from an admitted student. So I go on to ask if he had completed all the need-based aid application materials. We'd love to have you join us next year. This was his response. I think so, LOL. I've received Talks financial aid package, LOL. Now, I always try to respond to students appropriately, but I didn't know how to respond in this case. So this one went unanswered, unfortunately. Looking at another example, this student was unhappy with test scores. And all the message said, my ACT score, poo, February 11, I'm taking again. I don't know if it was poor and they left out the R, or if they were describing the test score as like something you step in the yard in the dog park. But anyway, it's one we got a laugh out of. Okay, so this student was invited to a scholarship weekend at a school where I used to be. And at that event, we would post photographs of the students so that students would be able to see their future classmates and know names and images. So this was a person who had not submitted the photo beforehand. And so my colleague reached out to encourage that photo, very nicely, of course. And this was the response back to my former colleague, Amy. You dumb pumpkin, F you, only it was really spelled out. And this student didn't intend to email Amy Hill back. This student thought that she was emailing some of her friends. Now I would, as a dad, I would say you should never talk like that. But be careful with that reply all, the reply, knowing who it's going to. But the story, more of a story here rather, is in the office for a while, that became our jovial jab at someone. We would, if they did something ridiculous, we would say, you dumb pumpkin. So it really worked itself into office culture for a while. One more thing I'll say is that this student had a call from the Dean of Admission that next morning, and the student was really mortified. It was an honest mistake, but definitely it led to a story that I've told for years afterwards. This one is from a mom of a student who was invited off the wait list at a college. So she writes, okay, sorry to bother again. Notice the word again. So there'd been an earlier conversation. But is there a link I could send the guidance at my child's high school so she could send the final transcript? She's going to update it on Common App. But if you prefer she send it directly to the Hendrix link, that would be great. Now, I admit I took some liberty. I added in Hendrix as the name. At the real school where this happened, the college name was misspelled, just as I misspelled Hendrix right here. So definitely know how to spell the colleges to which you're applying. And then the mom signs off, thanks so much, and promise I shall not email this week, ha ha ha. And then you see the signature line, Apple plus Cheryl equals inseparable. And then there was another email. Remember, she had promised she wasn't going to email again. Oh, and sorry, following from last night's email with all my questions. Registering for the right classes, when and how does that happen? Reason I ask, cause the local college is already doing it for first years. I promise it will not be this bad once he is in Hendrix. This one was sent to a student who had submitted some application materials, so perhaps test scores or a resume or a rec letter, but no application. And so the student was sent an email saying, hey, we know you've started your application. Make sure you finish it. We'd love to see it. And the student writes back, I finished my application. Are you sure you haven't received it? Oops. And we respond, we have your transcript, but not the Common App yet. So check online, make sure you submitted it. And the response from the student, okay, get on there today and check, but will I still be qualified for early decision money you guys give away? So that one just made me laugh, thinking of us just throwing money out the door. Of course, there are attractive financial aid and scholarship packages, but it just made me chuckle. Number 6, from an applicant. This is just to say that the student's application was complete and it was going on to the admission counselor, Sarah Butler. And the student responded, my counselor is not Sarah Butler, it is Mrs. Schwartz. So we're assuming Mrs. Schwartz was the school guidance or college counselor at the high school, whereas Sarah Butler would have been the admission representative. But again, with some of these, you're seeing, not proper punctuation, capitalization, signature line, just part of what Jade was mentioning earlier. We just want you to be as professional as possible as you're communicating with us. This one was ugly. So this college sent out general emails when an admission decision was made, saying an update has been made on your admission application. Click here to view the update. And we're guessing William might not have been admitted because this was the response back. So him using foul language with us, that wasn't very nice. Okay, this one. What kind of scholarships do you offer? Also, what about your psychology program? What's it about? Whose is the teacher? Just proof these before you send. We're awaiting notification of a student's acceptance to the University of Agnes Scott. This kind of goes in with the line of knowing the name of the college. Jade, is it the University of Agnes Scott?
Agnes Scott College.
Agnes Scott College, that's right. And now that wraps up. Hope you found those as funny as I do. Sometimes I just get cackling when I look at those again. But we'll open this up to see what's on your mind and see what questions you have. And I see that Ash has shared some of the questions that you've all posted. So we're grateful for those. So this first one here, what are some of the best questions prospective students can ask to get a true sense of the college while on-site visits are not possible? So Jade, do you have any initial thoughts?
Yeah, so I think that's a great question, but I almost want to put it back on the student a little bit. I think it's going to really depend on what the priorities for you are in terms of what you're looking for in a college. So I think like when I was going through this process, I knew, like, I went to a really small high school. I knew I wanted a small college. Diversity was really important to me. So those were probably where a lot of my questions were going to kind of be geared towards. But I think it really depends on what you feel like you are looking for in your college experience. So you might be wondering kind of like, what do students do on weekends? You might be wondering, for some colleges, you know, what would it be like to, like if you're not interested in Greek life, like what would it be like to be a student on your campus if I'm not involved in Greek life or something like that. And I actually think in these cases, a lot of the time it's, if what you're trying to get a sense of is the student experience, if that's the piece that you feel like you can't see as tangibly, having opportunities to connect with students is going to be really important. And I think a lot of admission offices are recognizing that right now, and they're creating opportunities to connect with current students. So yeah, that's a little bit. I mean, I think it's really going to depend on what when you think about what your priorities are, what you need out of your college experience, being able to find questions related to that. Ryan, do you have anything that you want to add to that?
No, I think what advice you offered is wonderful. Jade highlighted the student experience type questions. And a question that I would always love to receive from a student from a territory where I serve as the admission representative is when a prospective student would ask if there was anyone from from their hometown or their home state, especially if it's pretty far away. So if you aren't in the Atlanta area or you aren't in, Arkansas, you might want to hear what it's like to be there from out of state or from another part of the country or the world. And we are more than open to making those connections for you.
Yeah. I'm thinking for us also, the women's college experience is something I get a lot of questions about, or location. So what it's like to be in Atlanta or right outside of Atlanta for us would be, I think, important to a lot of students coming in. But again, that has to do with kind of the identity of our college. So the next question I see is, what if we did not receive an answer to our email? Should we send it again? I think that's a great question. I think something that most of us as like small colleges really try to pride ourselves in is that we do try to be really intentional about communicating with students. I know I give myself a 24-hour kind of turnaround time. So what I would say is definitely, and I do this when if I'm like reaching out to either a student or another office on campus or something like that, I give myself a few days to hear back. They might be on vacation. They might just, be, for us, we do a lot of typically we do a lot of recruiting. This fall might look a little bit different, but there might be a reason that there might be a little bit of a delay. So I usually give it a few days. I wouldn't email someone back within like 12 hours or anything like that. I would give it a little bit more time than that. If you do have a more urgent question, I think sometimes phone is a way to kind of get an answer a little bit sooner. Or kind of for us, like a general, like calling our general admission line, if it is something that you think you need a little bit sooner than from an individual admission counselor. But I think if it has been a few days and you haven't heard back, I don't think it's a problem. Usually how I would, address it with my peers if something happened is I would say something like, hi, just following up on this. Did you get a chance to look at this or something like that? So that would be kind of my advice about that piece. Ryan, do you have anything that you'd want to say to that?
Yeah, to add to that, I think following up again is appropriate in a way that Jade described. But if it gets to be, if you do that and you still don't respond, as someone who's a supervisor of staff in the division and wanting to foster a great sense of communication with the admission counselors here, I recommend you contact the director of admission or the dean of admission and say, hey, just following up. But at the same time, show grace. I know there have been situations like that before where I've heard from individuals, students, and they say, hey, I've left 3 voicemails or 2 emails or whatever the case may be. And I've sat with that admission counselor and those messages are nowhere to be found. So I don't know, some dark circle of spam or something, but just show a little grace. But as a division head, I would want to know if a student was feeling unresponded to. Okay, the next question. When sharing our email address with colleges, can we give them our address connected with our high school? Or is it better to give them an address that's permanent? That may be a good question to ask your school counselor. And the reason I see a benefit for both. But one positive of creating and sharing an address that's more permanent is that high schools will discontinue and inactivate email addresses after you graduate. It may be the day after you graduate, it may be 6 months after you graduate. You just don't know, and it's not always consistent. So I hate to offer advice and say, oh, you'll be fine to keep using your high school address. Eventually, after you place your enrollment deposit, the college will give you, for example, your hendrix.edu address. But I would speak to your school counselor about that. If you're not sure about that or you're hesitant, I think it may be wise to create a more permanent address that's appropriate for all of your college information.
So there's a question about social media. It says, sometimes it may not be the student's post. How can students minimize the impact of other posts or messages addressed to them? Ryan, do you have ideas on this?
I don't know if I have ideas specific to this particular scenario, but one thing I want to let you know is we don't have the time to be poring over every social media post of every applicant we have. There's, the handful of times I've looked at social media when we've had an applicant, I know a few years ago there was an alum who said, oh, you should check out this student's post, they're inappropriate photos. Well, when I got on there, the photos of a young woman in a bathing suit on a boat, I'm like, well, you're on a boat, you're supposed to be on a bathing suit. I saw nothing wrong with that. So, I guess another social media advice, I used to say, don't post something that you wouldn't want a grandparent to see, but I've seen some grandparents post some ridiculous things as well. So, this is a great question as a dad. That's something I deal with a lot of times with my kids. But one thing I just wanted to ensure you that I don't know a college out there that's poring over social media for every applicant that they see. But perhaps if there is something that's come up and you think, this is something I'm concerned about, reach out to your college admission rep and say, hey, I just want to let you know this is going on. Here was my post. Here was the follow-up. I did nothing inappropriate. Just wanted to be upfront about this. So you get in front of that message.
I think I'd also add, I think in general, if you're kind of realizing that as you're kind of going into this kind of new phase of your life, if you're realizing like, oh, I've been tagged in pictures last year, I didn't see it as a problem. This year, I don't want that to be kind of how people are seeing me. It could be, you know, whether it's or if someone else posted something that relates to you that you maybe were at one point comfortable with that you're not comfortable with anymore, I general advice think it's totally acceptable to like reach out to your friends if that's the kind of relationship you have with that person, and kind of explain to them, hey, I don't like the way I'm kind of appearing in this, and I would love if that could be removed. Hopefully you can take that with you beyond just like for college purposes, but that would, I think, be my advice for that piece. So another question, when is an appropriate time to first email an admission officer? Can high school sophomores and juniors email them, or should they wait? So I will try to tackle this question, Ryan. I think you've had more experience at multiple institutions than I have, so maybe you have more perspective, but I'm always happy to talk to a student. Like, what I love about my job is talking to students. So I'm always happy to talk to a student at any level. I will say that if I'm talking to a sophomore, that conversation might look a lot different than when I'm talking to a senior. I might try to have more of a general conversation to kind of get a sense of what they might be looking for in general, give them an overview of the college, you know, process. I might not even speak so much about Agnes Scott and try to be a little bit more general. Sometimes sophomores have very pointed questions, and I'm happy to answer those too. But I feel like my job is to answer questions for students. So at any point, I'm okay with reaching out. Though I do want to emphasize, and I think your high school counselors probably feel this way too, there's something to be said about like enjoying your time in high school too, and not being so kind of bogged down in the college experience. I think I would feel really, you know, sad for a student who was like emailing me every week as a sophomore, because you have so much time to like evolve, and your plans might change. You might think that you want one thing as a sophomore and want something else later. So I think it's totally fine to reach out, but I would, you know, I think like in terms of like frequency and in terms of what kinds of questions you're asking, give yourself some grace and some time with that too. Ryan, do you have anything that you'd say about that?
Oh, I love to hear from students at all points in time. And as Jade mentioned, I'm going to tailor my response to, you know, what's appropriate of where you are with your search. So if you're a sophomore, if you're a junior, it is perfectly fine to reach out. And I'm seeing a future question as well that ties into this. So Ash, I'm going to jump ahead a couple. But sometimes you may think, gosh, I don't have any questions, but I just want to introduce myself. Let it be that simple. And just say, hey, I'm kind of intrigued by Hendrix College or Agnes Scott College, and just want to let you know that I'm out here, and if there are future opportunities to engage, or when we get to travel again, if there are opportunities for engagement in my area, I'd love to visit with you. So I love messages like that, even if there aren't specific questions.
On that same note, like I saw a question about kind of introverted students and that kind of a thing. And I think that in general, you know, you don't have to have, I mean, it's great if you do have questions prepared and that kind of a thing, but we are not going to judge you if you don't have, you know, a set of if you can't, you know, if you're not comfortable carrying the conversation entirely. I think that, you know, a lot of the time we're coming up with talking points, and we know what questions that we want to ask of you to get to know you better as well. So I think that kind of ties to that question and the previous question that Ryan just kind of addressed.
And I know that some of you might be interested in varsity athletics at a college, and at schools like ours at the Division III level. A lot of times we don't have the resources to send recruiters all around the country. And so there was a question about varsity athletic possibilities. Most all sports have an inquiry form you could fill out. And you may not want to fill that out as early as, you know, sophomore year, but I maybe get, you know, at least half of your high school experience down. So you'd be able to share any stats and times or whatever the metrics are associated with your sport. So next question here, what helps prospective students stand out to admission officers in a positive way? And some of this is going to go back to a recommendation Jade had earlier of let it be student demonstrated. I am a parent. I love engaging with parents, but students, this is your experience. So make sure you're the one doing the outreach. That's what stands out in my mind when I see students who have taken initiative upon themselves.
Yeah, I think I agree with that piece, that initiative and that kind of forthcomingness of it. I also would say students who have like, and I don't expect you to be an expert on Agnes Scott, like that's my job, right? But like, I think a lot of the time when students have somewhat of a familiarity, like if they're like, oh yeah, you're in Decatur, or oh yeah, you're a women's college or something like that, when you're demonstrating a familiarity and kind of letting me know what excited you about us as an institution, that's something else that would stand out to me a little bit too.
Okay, I see a question here. So knowing about face-to-face interviews are valuable, but is a strike against you if you do not engage in face-to-face interviews? I can speak from Hendrix here. It is not a strike against you. We do not require interviews. We invite students for, right now, virtual chats. But if you don't do one, it's not going to be seen as anything against you.
I would say very, very little in this process would we consider a penalty in our review process, the way that Agnes Scott reviews applications. So you would not be at a disadvantage. We have an official interview option, and we have other options for students who decide not to do the interview option. So I think that's all of the time that we have. I think there were a few questions that we can address later that we missed, but I think we hit most of them. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Ryan and Jade, for sharing this information, and for Ash for helping out and with the questions. Students and counselors, thank you for joining for this session as well. As you close this window, a quick 4-question survey will appear. We ask for your feedback. We also encourage you to check out the rest of the CTCL programming and recordings, all found at strivescan.com/virtual/CTCL. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.